Happy Monday, everyone. We are back with another episode of AKP Sports Talk. As usual, I'm Ari here with Korea. How is your Monday going, Korea?
It's been a busy one. I've been driving all day. I told Ari off camera, but I've been driving all day. Usually, an hour and a half trip took me 5 hours today because since I'm in Washington, we have Snoqualmie Pass that had so much snow, couldn't even get through it, so we had to go around. But literally walked into the door not even 30 minutes ago. But let's talk some basketball. Ari, how's your Monday going?
It's going pretty good, pretty good. So we'll start off before we get into the craziness that was Saturday of college basketball. We'll start off with just the updates of the MLB. So as we all know, or as we've been going over, today is the last day for the MLB and MLBPA to reach an agreement for the season to start on time, which was March 31st. So about a little like a 4.5 weeks from today, basically. The latest, I've been keeping up with Jesse Rogers on Twitter of ESPN. Has kind of been giving all the updates, and I'm just refreshing right now to see if there's anything like recent. But the last, so they're still going. So they've been going for like 5, 6, 7 hours, whatever. They went like the same amount of time yesterday, so it still sounds like they're probably not going to reach an agreement by the end of today. But the fact that they're at least still trying, like, is good, is good still. Um, as this was 49 minutes ago, Rob Manfred, the commissioner, was walking by media, and when he was asked if there's any progress, he said, "We're working at it." So they're clearly still, trying to come up with the agreement by the end of today. But um, obviously, like with any kind of deadline like this, it always seems like there's no hope until there is. So, like, it seems like there's at least trying, and maybe there's like a 5%, chance. But Korea, do you have any other thoughts other than what we've already been talking about for the past week or 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, this weekend I didn't get to see much of it because I was on vacation. But I saw a couple of notifications on my phone say that week on Saturday that a deal could be reached by today, and I was getting a little more optimistic. And then yesterday I was like, it looks like there's still tensions between the MLB and the MLBPA, which means not again. And then I'm on the way home and I see a Bleacher Report thing say that the MLB could be canceled a month of games, which is even more scary. So I don't know what's going to happen. At this point, I've already said this. The season's going to start slow, not slow. It's going to be delayed with everything going on. Today's the day. It's decision day. I'm looking at my calendar. It's February 28th, and Ari, obviously, like they're still in meetings. But I don't. If there's some Cinderella or any kind of magic potion, fairy, whatever that is, we need that at this point. The Hail Mary, the final shot, because we're recording this as of 4:06 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on February 28th, and no agreement still has been made. So at this point, it's not more of what needs to happen. It's just more of when. Like, when is the season gonna start? Because if we're still talking about potentially postponed games, and it's February 28th, like, if we're still talking about postponing games and it's February 28th, and mind you, like, we've been working on this for all month. They had a whole week about this. So, like I said, like, it's progress, but at the same time, when does progress just turn into stalling? It just seems like it's just being stalled right now, or just progress is not really moving as as I hoped for in terms of actually something happening with the MLB. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. I've always been hopeful. That's not going to change for me. But tomorrow's March, so maybe new month, new day. We'll see what happens. But obviously, Manfred just spoke to the media, said that there's something going. So that's pretty much all we can really rely on as of this point. And I'm checking my phone, and I'm not seeing anything either. So I mean, it's just a matter of when, pretty much. What else can you do?
Yeah, as Dominic said, it might be a minute. I'll keep, I guess we'll both keep checking Twitter over the next hour or hour and a half as we go through this episode to see if there's any other news that breaks. But realistically, it's probably gonna, if there is a deal that's gonna get done today, it's literally gonna be like 11:50 or 11:55 or something like that, like right before midnight hit. So we'll keep updated on that. So now we'll head into the main topic of the show, which is the craziness that was this past Saturday, the first time ever that the top 6 teams and 7 of the top 10 all fell. So we'll kind of go in order here. We'll start with Gonzaga, following the St. Mary's, who I believe was number 23, if I'm not mistaken, heading into that game. Um, Obviously, Gonzaga seemed, unstoppable even against, the better teams in the WCC, but everything that's kind of went downhill. They were down by 15 and a half. Like St. Mary's basically controlled the whole game. Gonzaga went on, some runs to get back into it. And even when they were down by 15 and a half, you still thought that, they had a realistic chance of winning. But Chet Holmgren was in foul trouble. Drew Timme was 2 for 10, so is probably his worst game of the year. And they just shot 36% overall from the field. This wasn't a good performance. Credit to St. Mary's defense. Tommy Kuzi led them with 14, and the biggest difference, or not, I don't know if it was the biggest difference maker, but St. Mary's outscored Gonzaga 14-0 in bench points. So Gonzaga has literally 0 bench points. So that, we'll see that could be something that hurts them, once as they get reached further into the tournament. But that would be a story for another day. But for now, for this game, Curry, what were your thoughts?
So
from this
I
game?
got to watch highlights of this game. This game was a big game for me. Personally, it was just more, what is it? Just praising what St. Mary's did. I mean, Gonzaga is always going to be at the top of the West Coast Conference. They always have that one loss, sometimes to BYU in this conference. This conference is getting a lot more competitive as the years goes on. And this was a big win for St. Mary's. St. Mary's has always been on that bubble pretty much all season. And now they're a lock, beating the number 1 team in the country. So, if you really come down to it, it's just, this was a big win for St. Mary's at home. Obviously, Gonzaga, they're not going to win every game. They look dominant in this conference. They had bad shooting day. Obviously, you mentioned Chet Holmgren, was in foul trouble. You have Timme shooting 2 for 10, and those are your 1-2 combo right there. And if the 1-2 combo is not working for you, obviously Nembhard tried to get him in this game, but it was just too much of a deficit. Like you said, they already down like 15 and a half. So in terms of, bad loss for Gonzaga, it's not really a bad loss. I mean, Gonzaga, you can count on one hand how many losses they have this season. Like it doesn't deteriorate their doesn't deteriorate their domination in pretty much this year. It does raise a little concern just because of, going against those, more defensive teams. If they take out that 1-2 combo and Chet Holmgren and Drew Timme, that's kind of be a big sign for Gonzaga going down to March Madness, maybe like Elite Eight, Final Four type opponent right there. But for St. Mary's, this was a big win. Pretty much they weren't on the bubble, but now that they've got this win under their belt, obviously they're kind of showing the community like, yeah, we beat this team, put us in, and they're going to be in. Obviously, it was a pretty much a magical game for St. Mary's. Other than that, it's really nothing much. St. Mary's big win. I think they're still a predicted 5 or 6 seed. I think they're locked 5 or 6 seed in the NCAA tournament. Gonzaga is still number 1 overall right now because we're going to get into the rest of the top 6 in a little bit. But, yeah, Gonzaga is still at the top. I don't see anything changing. And now they head into the West Coast Conference tournament. I'll get that into you later in the week since they don't start until Thursday, I believe. But these are just the 2 top teams in the conference right now. Gonzaga is number 1 in the West Coast, and number 2 is St. Mary's. So this is potentially a championship match. The rematch is going to happen at the end of the West Coast Conference tournament. But for now, it was a great game to watch. Kind of just shows you, how St. Mary's can, bring it against these top teams. They haven't played that much competition, obviously, since they're in the West Coast Conference. But as the conference gets stronger, Obviously, St. Mary's has to play San Fran twice. Obviously, San Fran is a good team. BYU, obviously, BYU's always been up there, and then Gonzaga. So, I mean, this was a good game for St. Mary's, for a good win for them. We'll see how they do in the tournament. I don't think they have that much of a harder path for a team like a BYU team. Obviously, BYU, I believe they are the 5 seed in the West Coast Conference tournament, so they got to win they got to win against whoever the first round opponent wins then, and then they got to beat that opponent. Then they got to play San Fran, who is tough. That's pretty much a bubble game right there. And then that team has to play Gonzaga, number 1 team in the country. So St. Mary's is sitting a lot more comfortably now. Gonzaga, it's just another loss on their season. Nothing to scare, nothing to be worried about. Everyone, has those losses that, just mean more to a different team in the conference.
Yeah, the way I view it, and I'll go in with Arizona, is that it's better to lose now and get that, gut check in the regular season compared to, later in March. So, it's no team really. I don't think any team has ever gone undefeated. And obviously, this isn't their first loss, but it's their first loss in a long time. So, it's better to get it out now, I would say. And it was a tough road game against a good top 25 team. So now we'll get into Arizona and Colorado. Arizona was up 5.5. They're kind of controlling most of the first half, and then Colorado they started off the second half on a 13-5 run, took the lead, and did not look back from there. It's the 5th straight loss for Arizona in Boulder, so they've always had trouble against Colorado on the road. They beat them by double digits at home earlier in the year. Christian Koloko was in foul trouble for most of the game, and then Mather and Tubelis. Credit to Colorado's defense. They especially in the second half, they really stepped up. And another point that really made a difference is that Colorado out-rebounded Arizona, and which I don't know if any other team against Arizona this year has out-rebounded them. So that was another big factor. That they weren't big or anything. I don't know. They know where to go off the glass, to get the rebounds. So what were your takeaways, Korea?
Yeah, Colorado, this is the team we've been talking about. You said Arizona State, obviously, but this win was a big win for Colorado. They've been, around that 5, 6, 7 line of the Pac-12 tournament, pretty much on their winning streak. They suffered a bad loss against ASU at home just 2 days before that, so that was a good bounce-back win to even out the series against obviously the Arizona schools. But you mentioned it, out-rebounding Arizona is definitely hard. So shout out to the Colorado Buffaloes for that. Obviously 14 of them coming from Walker. That just shows you how dominant he was throughout this game. And along with Evan Batty, and then De Silva, they were just shooting the lights out. Yes, their shooting from 3 was not good, but they just found their way inside and just found those shots, those big shots. Obviously, you mentioned Arizona, just tough shooting game. This was a big win for Colorado, kind of getting more and more momentum as they head toward the Pac-12 tournament, because right now they're sitting just about, I think, half a game behind Oregon, who has been slipping now since they've lost. Now, I think, back-to-back to UCLA? No, they beat UCLA, but they lost to USC. So now they're in this weird position, and Colorado's just sneaking up behind them. So, big win for Colorado at home. Obviously, you mentioned they just ran away with it in the second half. Arizona, obviously, you mentioned it's not too big of a concern, obviously. They're still one of the most dominant rebounding teams in the country. You mentioned it for the past 5 years in Boulder, they haven't won. So it's just always a place that they struggle at. But only 2 losses in the conference. Arizona's fine. They're more you'll see more of Arizona's just dominance in the Pac-12 tournament, in my opinion. But for Colorado, this was a big win for them. I think now they're just right on the outside of that bubble, and I think they need an Oregon State run of last year to pretty much be in the tournament or be considered, just because of just how tight the bubble is right now. We'll get into that a little bit, but good win for Colorado. This was a must-need win for them if they wanted to kind of enter the tournament talks again. For the Wildcats, obviously, just second loss in the conference. Nothing too nothing too bad. Obviously, everyone has a bad game. Like it's like a Gonzaga, St. Mary's. Like this was a bigger win for Colorado than it was a bigger loss for Arizona because Colorado, they needed this. They were sitting at 19. They were sitting at 18-10. They were rising in the conference. They had a bad loss to ASU at home that we talked about, and then now they beat Arizona in the game after. So big win for Colorado. Nothing to worry about for Arizona.
Yeah, obviously, Arizona has a lot of character and personality on this team, and so we'll see how they respond from kind of like a gut punch, I would call this. I mean, they have one day off, and then they go to USC tomorrow on the road, so that's going to be a huge game to see how they rebound and bounce back from this loss. They beat USC at home earlier this year. I was at that game, and USC played them really tight. It was wire to wire, so. And I believe it's senior night for USC too. It's sold out. I saw on Twitter today there's no more tickets left. So it's going to be a big crowd. So it should be a good game tomorrow between Arizona and USC. So now we'll go over to Auburn and Tennessee. And we've been saying it all year with Auburn scoring. And, they have the defense, but they can only be so reliant on Jabari Smith so much to score. He had 27 and Katie Johnson 18. So those two at 45, that's over 70% of their points. And so you're not going to win. You're not going to beat many good teams when you have two guys scoring that big of a percentage of points, unless they both go for like 40 or something. But again, Auburn's known for their defense, and their defense will only take them so far against another top 25 team on the road. And that's what we've been seeing, for a good amount of the year, and including on Saturday against Tennessee. What were your takeaways, Korea?
I'm gonna say this right now. Auburn is the number one seed that is trending in the wrong direction right now. The Tigers, you mentioned, they're so reliant on Jabari Smith that they don't have an offense. I mean, when you're shooting 35% from the field, obviously Wendell Green Jr. just horrible shooting day, 2 of 15 from the field, 1 of 7 from behind the arc. But when you rely on Jabari Smith and KD Johnson so much, and yes, you're a defensive-minded team. That's what Bruce Pearl is doing at Auburn. But if you're going into the tournament, you need to score. And Tennessee, they were just more balanced. I mean, obviously Vescovi led the team with 14, but you have Chandler right behind him at 13. And then you have, James. And then you also have Ziegler right behind them at 13. And then you have James at 10. So you have all these players scoring double digits. It's more balanced with Tennessee. For Tennessee, though, that was kind of a surprise for me. I knew Tennessee was going to be a big test for this Auburn team on the road, considering Tennessee's been up and down, but they've been sneaking up as of late. Obviously now winning back-to-back after a very poorly offensive game against Arkansas. But this is interesting now because it just shows you how the top of the SEC is just so close. I mean, you have the 4 teams, Auburn, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Kentucky, all within a game with each other for first place. So this weekend is going to be big for the SEC, determining those top 4 buys. They pretty much all clinched the buys, but it's just determining with the order of everything. But if I'm an Auburn fan, I'm getting a little scared because we've seen this Auburn team dominate at the beginning of the season. But now as they become, more exposed to the spotlight, people are knowing, okay, if you just clamp Jabari Smith or something, or, just rely more on your offensive scoring ability, then obviously Auburn's going to, not do as well. So it just shows how Auburn's reliance on the defense is not going to last them too long in this tournament. This may be a hot take, but I could see Auburn being a second round exit. I could see Auburn losing to a team like a Murray State who shoots the lights out and, just knows how to play basketball and is more, even though you don't get to see Murray State, you've seen the stats. They put up about 86 points a game. And yes, Auburn is that defensive team, but at some point they got to shoot the ball. So for Tennessee, this is a solid win. Tennessee's around that 4 line. They're probably going to move up to the 3 after this big win. But Auburn, watch out for Auburn. They're declining at the wrong time, but I don't know why, but something is telling me to just go with them. But at the same time, Auburn is looking like a team that's going to be upset. So I don't know with Auburn. Auburn's a toss-up for me right now. We'll have to see how they do this weekend. I believe they only have what game this week? Let me double check that. But they do have 2. Auburn this week, all they got to do is beat Mississippi State and South Carolina. That shouldn't be too hard. Mississippi State's been off the bubble, and then South Carolina, not having the best season. So Auburn should win these games, but you never know with this conference anymore. But bad Auburn, it's more bad Auburn than good Tennessee in this one.
Yeah, we talked about it last week. Auburn moved down to 5 in the AP poll, so they could be a 2 seed now. And we mentioned that matchups will be a huge difference maker, because if they match up in round 2, let's see, it's a 2 and 15. Is that 7 versus 10 round 2, or
yeah, that's 7.
So if they match up with like a good 7, team that scores a lot, then that could be a potential upset to look out for. But again, obviously matchups matter and make a big difference. So that will be something to look out for. And we're 13 days from Selection Sunday now. So when their brackets revealed, and I think we'll probably go live most likely for that. So we'll have to see who they potentially match up with, and we'll keep an eye on that. So now we'll go on to the 4th of 7 upsets on. And Michigan State is this team we just can't. It's hard to figure them out. Like probably one of the most inconsistent teams, but they have the clear talent to be a really good team. But I feel like the biggest, headline from this game was 3-point shooting and turnovers. Purdue went 1 for 9 from 3. To Michigan State going 9 for 20, so that's 8 more threes. So that's 24 more points. Michigan State had off threes. And Purdue had 17 turnovers. So those two really played a big difference in this result. And again, Zach Edey and Jaden Ivey combined for 41. Purdue 65, so that's over 60%. So again, the same theme as Auburn, with relying on 2 scorers for well over half of their points, and that's not going to go well most of the time in a tough road game. And so, Korea, what do you have on this game?
You mentioned this Michigan State team. We talked about it. They have been having this big slump as of recently, obviously losing pretty much a lot of their games before their win against Purdue. They lost to Penn State. And then they lost to Iowa, and they lost to Illinois. So this team was just looking like, okay, they're on the outside or sliding down that bubble. And then all of a sudden they beat Purdue on Saturday, and we're like, is this a tournament team? Is this Tom Izzo team good? I mean, but then again, you mentioned it, which is all the turnovers that Purdue is having, just a very sloppy game from Purdue. I don't expect this in the tournament from this Purdue team. Obviously, I think a lot more, team playing as they usually do. They do rely very heavily, though, on Jaden Ivey, as we mentioned it. Obviously, lottery pick in this upcoming draft. But still, they rely on him a lot. Obviously, their big man, Zach Edey, in the post. Obviously, he had a good game, but they rely on those two a lot. It's kind of looking like that it's kind of looking like that Gonzaga team right now. They just rely. But, I mean, Gonzaga is more deep. But this Purdue team, they just rely so much on Edey and Ivey that, it's not really a
was it Auburn that you're thinking of?
Auburn? Exactly. It was Auburn. Yeah. Purdue is looking like an Auburn right now. And in terms of Michigan State, it was okay. It wasn't a great game for the Spartans as well. I mean, you mentioned it. They only they got out rebounded by 10. So Purdue was just getting the board, but they just weren't doing anything on offense. But the thing about Michigan State, they were playing more team ball. They got 20 assists in that game. So obviously trying to find the open man. That's what they need to get back to doing, because that was what Tom Izzo was implementing at the beginning of the season. Michigan State was one of the best passing teams because they always find always found the open person. But then Big Ten play happened, and then people started to figure it out. And now I think Michigan State's they went down the slump, and now they're coming back out of the slump. And I think they may have a deep run in this tournament, depending on how the season ends for them. Now, obviously, Michigan State's not easy. They still got 3 more games, and it's a mountain to climb. They play tomorrow against Michigan. That is a big game. Big game. Michigan versus Michigan State, that's tomorrow. And then Thursday, they got to go to Ohio State. That's not easy. And then they got to host Maryland, who just upset Ohio State. So it's looking – it's all right. It's not great for Michigan State, but a huge bounce back win for the Spartans are going to be huge, getting that momentum back as they head into the end of the regular season. But yeah, Michigan, that's a big win for them. Obviously, they've had a bunch of close losses recently, except for Iowa, who just beat them by 26. I think that Iowa game was kind of the game that they said, all right, I'm done with this, and we're starting winning games again. Because, I mean, when they put up 60 against Iowa, barely shooting the ball, and then it was a very gritty game against Purdue. I was watching, it was very back and forth. But at the end, Michigan State just played a cleaner game of basketball. So this was good Michigan. Purdue's a little concerning, but I still think Purdue will have – I still think Purdue would be champions at the end of the Big Ten tournament. But Michigan State's back in my tournament right now. They were not on the outside, but they were, sliding down my list. But now they're back. So shout out to Michigan State. They are doing their thing, and I think the Spartans are going to be a tournament team. And I think they could have a deep run in the Big Ten tournament, depending on who they play, obviously.
Yeah, you mentioned their remaining schedule, the regular season, so they're going to have, more tests to prove that this wasn't just a fluke win against Purdue. So we'll see how those games go leading into the conference tournament. So now we'll dive into the top 10 matchup that was Kansas against Baylor. Agbaji had, I think, 27, Christian Brown had 17, so they led the way for Kansas. Baylor was only 3 for 14 from 3 compared to 7 for 28 from 3 for Kansas, so both of them shot poorly, and Kansas doubled the amount of shots from deep that Baylor took. Flo Thamba had 18, Jeremy Sochan had 17 for Baylor. They just had the more balance. Again, Agbaji and Christian Braun had 44 to 70, so they had a large portion of their points, whereas Baylor had 6 players with at least 9, so they had the more balance. And it seems like that's kind of the theme of a lot of these teams that lost with 2 guys scoring most of their points, is that the balance, overweighs being so reliant on 2 players. But I believe Baylor moved up to 3, I believe. And 3, and Kansas moved down to 6. Curry, what were your takeaways with this game?
First of all, for Baylor, this is Baylor Kansas has kind of been the rivalry at the top of the Big 12 pretty much since about 2018, right before COVID happened. These 2 teams have always been dominant in the conference. So I know Kansas beat Baylor back in Allen Fieldhouse in Kansas, earlier in the season. But now, obviously, Baylor playing at home obviously had a big field. But you mentioned it with Agbaji, just pretty much shooting the lights out, went 8 of 22 from the field, 4 of 14 from behind the arc. So, you mentioned it, and also with Braun and McCormack for Kansas. It seemed like once again, you mentioned it, Kansas was really just reliant on their star guys. It just looked like Agbaji, was just kind of the guy, and their only guy for Kansas this week. For this past game. But when you're shooting, it was just bad shooting from both teams from behind the arc. But when you out rebound, pretty back and forth game. So for Baylor, this was a gritty win that they kind of needed to kind of cement their legacy as the defending champs, because everyone forgets Baylor are the defending champs. They just won March Madness last year, and people are still not giving Scott Drew the true credit, because obviously that team was very talented with Davion Mitchell and all of them. But now this is the new Baylor team under Scott Drew. So this was a gritty win for Baylor at home as they head toward the end of the regular season. For Kansas, it's not too concerning. It's more, who are they going to find other than Agbaji to get them points? And they just got to find that guy. But for Kansas, this season's not going to get any easier, because they got to play TCU twice, who's a tournament team. We'll talk about TCU in a little bit. And then they got to play Texas, and that's not easy, because all 3 of those teams are very near the top of the Big 12, which is one of the best conferences for basketball this year. For Baylor, this was the kind of that win to kind of push them back into that number 1 line. Everyone was kind of pushing them down to that 3 line after they lost to Texas Tech, and then they just looked a little inconsistent, and especially in that overtime game against OK State on the road. But now a big solid win. for the Bears as they head into the regular season. They only got 2 more games left. They play tonight against Texas, which is a huge game. That's a big rivalry as well down in I think that game is in Austin, and Baylor is right now a 1.5-point favorite. So that to me is just a toss-up. Whoever gets the last field goal wins at that game. And then you got Iowa State, who is now resurging in that Big 12 as well. So both teams do have a little bit of a trap heading into the into the end of the regular season. Baylor, I think, is going to be a competitive game against Texas tonight. For Kansas, they just got to beat TCU twice. Obviously, one of the games is rescheduled due to COVID and everything, but this is pretty much just the competition at the big top of the conference. I can see these two teams making it to the Big 12 championship again and facing off once again, just because of how dominant Baylor and Kansas are, not only within their conference but just throughout basketball. And so, two top 6 teams, I can definitely see Baylor and Kansas battling it out for that Big 12 championship. And honestly, that could be for whoever is the number 1 or number 2 seed, honestly. So they split the season. I'm hoping to see that the trilogy in the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, I was going to mention the Baylor-Texas game tonight. That should be a good one. Baylor won pretty handily at Baylor earlier in the year. So if they can beat Texas in the road, they could potentially solidify number 1 seed or at least come close to it. So now we'll go on to Kentucky against Arkansas. We saw both teams had a 30-point score. Oscar Tshiebwe had 30 and 18 for Kentucky, and J.D. Note had 30 for Arkansas. I believe it was Ty Washington, and I believe it was Severe Wheeler were both questionable entering this game, and they've been kind of banged up most of the year. They both came off the bench but played pretty regular minutes or pretty close to regular minutes. But it was pretty much a back and forth wire-to-wire game for the most part. There were a few, small runs, but it was pretty close the whole way. And it was kind of like a fluke 3 at the buzzer that I know it was one of the bad beats because Arkansas was a 2.5-point favorite and Kentucky hit the 3 at the buzzer to cover the 2.5 spread. So I know there were a lot of bad beats for that in the betting world that I saw. But Korea, what were your takeaways from this game?
I just want to say one name, J.D. Note. Let's talk about this man. This man dropped 30 against Kentucky. That is dominance. People forget that this Arkansas team struggled at the beginning because everyone, had Arkansas, maybe at that 3-4 line after their successful season last year under first-year head coach Eric Musselman. But now they were, they had that down slump in February where they were just, losing games and also end of January. And now look at them. They went from being middle of the pack in the SEC to now being a top 2 team. And they got to finish off against our LSU tournament team and Tennessee, who we already talked about. So Arkansas is slowly coming up my rankings. I like this Arkansas team a lot. Oh, excuse me. I don't know what I said. I like him a lot, honestly. It's a lot more balanced and a lot more dominant. I mean, we look at the box score and then we look at Note for his 30 points, shooting 50% from the field. And then we look at Jalen Williams, just dominant in the post, grabbed only man for Arkansas to get double digits in the post in terms of rebounds and double-double for him. Great day for the Razorbacks. Big dominant win at home. Also, Mude dropped 13. But the story of the day was Note. The story of the day was Note. He dropped 30 against this team. And obviously you mentioned Ty Washington coming off the bench for Kentucky. That's always been kind of something that, obviously you mentioned with the injury, obviously he was going to come back slowly, but obviously it looked like he was playing regular minutes. So obviously he didn't have a great shooting day. So that kind of just adds up. I mean, Ty Washington being banged up, coming into a really hot Arkansas team right now. It was kind of destined to be an upset, but at the same time, I know this Kentucky team will have also a deep run in the SEC tournament, as well as the NCAA tournament as well. Ty Washington's health is going to be something to look forward to as the season goes on for the Wildcats. Kentucky, they got to play Ole Miss and Florida to end the regular season, so not very, very hard. No more ranked opponents for Kentucky. I already mentioned Arkansas's regular season finales, but for Arkansas, great win at home. Not a bad loss for Kentucky considering Ty Washington was just not shooting the ball. And, obviously severe wheeler as well for Kentucky. So just not a great shooting day for Kentucky, but then again, they're not losing to like a Vanderbilt or someone at the bottom of the conference. So you mean that's disrespect to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's actually pretty good. They're not like a Ole Miss or something, but Arkansas is a very legitimate team. So I'm not too concerned about Kentucky right now. I am concerned about Washington's health. For Arkansas, this was a big win, and I feel like they can use this win to carry momentum into the SEC tournament. And I think they could have a deep run like last year in the NCAA tournament as well.
Yeah, I think it was the third or fourth game for Note with 30 plus this season. And as we know, in March, there's a lot of close games where you need to have that one guy you can rely on to hit that, shot in the last minutes of the game. And so, yeah, I think I agree. Arkansas could be, even I would go as far as to say a Final Four dark horse if they match up with the right teams. But yeah, they're another team that we'll be keeping an eye on once the bracket's revealed, and we'll see who they match up with. And then we'll finish off Saturday's slate with Texas Tech and TCU, the 7th top 10 team that went down on Saturday. Texas Tech was up 8 at half and just kind of collapsed for the most part. In the second half, Texas Tech had 20 turnovers, which isn't good, obviously, and TCU tried to give them the game away. They only shot 13 and 23 from the free throw line, which obviously is not very good. But we saw Bryson Williams have 21, Mike Miles have 26, so a couple big games from them. And we saw Texas Tech, they fell to 12 in the AP poll. What were your takeaways, Korea?
This is a number similar like Colorado-Arizona game where TCU is at home. They have a ranked opponent coming in, top-ranked opponent, Texas Tech, coming into the building. And TCU has always kind of been around that border. Now they were especially on the border of the bubble, especially after back-to-back losses. But this big win at home against Texas Tech, and you mentioned it, they almost gave up the game, only shooting 50% from the free throw line. That's something that TCU is going to have to rely on if they actually want to win games, not only in the Big 12 tournament but also in the NCAA tournament. Hitting your free throws, that's going to be big. So luckily they escaped that win after a dominant second half. For the Horned Frogs of obviously Mike Miles, leading scorer for TCU, 26 points, just hit everything from inside the 3-point range, 10 to 15 from the field. He led the team with 26 it was a very somewhat balanced game for Texas Tech. Obviously they had that big first half lead up by 8, but just TCU got hot at the right time and they came out of that locker room, trying to make a statement and, trying to get that big win that they really needed in this conference because they were slipping down. But obviously Bryson Williams of Texas Tech had a good game, 21 points, 8 or 9 from the field. Just, Texas Tech the Red Raiders tried to come back in this game, but, this is a big win for TCU. I think TCU needed this win in order to kind of remain out of that bubble talks because TCU, obviously they played Kansas twice, but out of that, all they had left is West Virginia. So they didn't really have that many, opportunities to beat these top-ranked opponents, but they finally got under their belt. I still think they're a tournament team right now, and especially coming off a bounce-back time, because the last time they played Texas Tech, they lost by 13 on the road. To have that big bounce-back win at home against this team is very, very good for their momentum. So great win for TCU at home. For Texas Tech, it's a little concerning. When they shoot 33% from three-point range, but they were hitting everything from just the field. They hit 58% of their not threes, from field goal range. But you mentioned it, 20 turnovers. If you turn the ball over, you're gonna cost yourself the game. So double-digit turnovers, that's something that the Red Raiders are going to have to try to limit if they want to have a good run into this tournament. For TCU, pretty much just hitting their free throws, but gritty win for TCU at home against this good Texas Tech team. They needed it. So, yeah.
Yep, for sure. So that will wrap up the Saturday talk from the historic day of upsets. And so now we'll head into the start of conference tournaments. Today's the Northeast. We got Farley Dickinson against Central Connecticut. That's a big one. A battle of the 4-21 against like 6-19 or whatever their records are.
Game right now is at halftime, and Farley Dickinson is up by 7, 34-27 against Central Connecticut. Winner gets Bryant in the Northeast Conference on Wednesday. this is a little first round matchup to preview. But this is it. It's champ week. Here we go. I'm excited. We got a couple more starting tomorrow as well. We got the Atlantic Sun starting tomorrow. We have the Horizon League
on Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday these are.
Yeah, Tuesday the 1st. We have the A-Sun, we have the Horizon, and I believe we have the Patriot as well. And then Wednesday we have the Big South and then the Ohio Valley. Ohio Valley is going to be something of intrigue to watch, obviously, with Murray State and Belmont, kind of near the top two teams in the conference. They will not play until Friday, so we have to wait until Friday to see those two teams in action. But for the other teams, obviously, Northeast, they start today. We'll see how that game goes, and then they don't play until Wednesday. But this is it. This is the start of it. One team that I want to talk about, though, that's going to be interesting is Loyola Chicago, and I think they have a little bit of a mountain to climb because they were in a prime position to be in first place in the Missouri Valley and win the Missouri Valley. All they had to do was just beat Northern Iowa on the road, and they just could not do that. They just looked very inconsistent in that game. Very, very poor performance for the for the Ramblers. Excuse me, I could not think of their mascot name, but now they went down all the way to 4, and it's looking like Loyola Chicago could be on the outside looking in of this tournament. I just saw Joe Lunardi's latest bracketology as of this morning, and he has Loyola Chicago as the last team in. So that just shows you how badly Loyola Chicago needs to have a good tournament and just win. Because if they don't win, they're out at this point. And then a bid stealer could come right in, like San Diego State or SMU or something like that. So Loyola Chicago is going to be a team to definitely watch this week for tournaments. They don't start until Thursday. Loyola, I think, does not play until Friday as well. So Friday is going to be a big day for those, bubble teams or tournament teams for the conference tournaments that start this week. But I'm excited. Champ Week's officially started. I'm going to watch all the games because it's Champ Week. I mean, yes, it's not, the real Champ Week, but it's still Champ Week. So this is just how it is. I mean, this is what I'm waiting for. March starts tomorrow. John Ross on Twitter, he's going to talk about this is March every single day this next month. So I'm just getting more and more excited. It's March, Ari. It's almost March. I'm very excited for this. But yeah, we're going to see a lot of, bigger conference tournaments starting next week, a week from today, probably on the 7th or something. But today we got a couple. We have a matchup today. We have some good ones tomorrow as well. But it's Champ Week, and if you were a casual trying to tune into which teams to look forward to, Friday is going to be one of your biggest days because you have Murray State playing in the semis. You have Belmont, who is on the border, still kind of is playing on that Friday. And then you have Loyola Chicago, who's also that last team in playing on Friday against Bradley in the first round of the Missouri Valley Conference Tournament. So, Ari, this is what we're waiting for. It's Champ Week. How excited are you to see some of these intriguing matchups?
Oh, very excited. As I said earlier, obviously, like you said, the bigger conferences start next week, but this week is the chance to start to see some of the potential, 12-5, 13-4 upsets potentially in the first round. And that's when most of these teams play. It's like mid to late this week into early next week. So I think that this is a week to watch if you're more of a casual fan who doesn't start to watch until this time of year, because some of these teams will be those last teams in that could potentially be those 12-5, 13-4 upsets that we see every year.
Yeah, I definitely can see some Cinderella teams coming out of this week. One of them definitely Murray State. Fantastic season. I think they're 28-2 now. They went undefeated in their conference. Just dominance for the Murray State Racers this year. That's a potential Cinderella team. They start on Friday. Obviously, Belmont up there, Loyola Chicago. The Northeast, they have Bryant. They're a pretty good team this year. So there are some Cinderellas coming out this week in conference championship tournament week that starts today. But obviously, we're going to talk about a lot more of the bigger ones like the Big 12, Pac-12, SEC, Big 10, all those big ones, Big East. Those all start next week by Wednesday. So those ones are going to have a lot more depth because obviously those teams play all the time and we see them all the time, like your Dukes and your Syracuse and your Oregons and Arizonas and all that stuff. So next week, Lastly, that's where probably most of the bubble teams are going to play. So we'll get you updated with all those bubble teams and how they do in the tournaments next week. But also we'll keep you updated on how they do this week and the last week of the regular season for some of them. But it's here. It's here. March is here, and I am very, very excited.
And I think if Saturday, tells us or confirms anything, it's just how wide open this whole field is. And so we definitely could see some runs from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seeds this year. It should be a fun year. So just as we wrap up, I'm just refreshing one more time of Jesse Rogers on Twitter. And the latest he had was about 40 minutes ago. 2 league negotiators were heading back to the player side. So they're still, as of just before 6 o'clock Mountain Time, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, they're still talking. So we have about 4-ish hours until it's midnight Eastern Time. But it seems like they've been talking since like 10 a.m. So this has been, I assume that they were planned on meeting basically all day to try to come up with this last minute agreement. So I guess we'll know on Wednesday's episode what the result was, and hopefully it's that we're gearing up for spring training in the next week. But for now, so on Wednesday we'll talk about Monday and Tuesday's college basketball games that we saw, and then we'll preview some more of the tournaments that are coming up as the conference tournaments start to happen more. Like you said, some of the bigger conferences still have a few more regular season games this week, and then they start next week. So those will be Wednesday and Friday. We'll go over those bigger conference tournaments, and for now, we'll keep an eye on more of the mid-major updates over the next couple of days. And so that will be Wednesday's show and Friday. And as you said, we're about Eastern time. We're like less than 4 hours away till it's midnight. So we're already in March. And so it's a good time. And we'll be here for your coverage of March Madness all month long. And I think, as I said before, we'll probably try to go live for Selection Sunday if we can. And then, of course, we'll maybe go live and do our brackets, and we'll show you all our updates. And and did you want to talk about the pool at all, Korea, or will we save it?
Not really, but well, I do want to talk about one more thing. NFL, obviously, as free agency gets closer and closer, we're going to give you some of the best coverage of who's going where. Obviously, Ari, you know him as the fantasy.football expert. He'll give you a lot more insight on that as obviously March is right around the corner, which also means beginning of free agency. We have some big names being mentioned, being in the quarterback loop. We've obviously heard of the whole Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers thing, but also now Carson Wentz, Jimmy G. We'll give you all those updates.
We had like Kyler Murray on his Twitter and putting out that statement, and we had all of that too. So
now his agent is telling him that his agent is now saying that Kyler Murray wants to get paid. So that's something to kind of keep interest as well. We'll give you all that updates on all the NFL news. Obviously, this is going to be primarily college basketball, as already said, just because March is right around the corner, a few hours. So, but yes, this is going to be another episode of AKP Sports Talk.
Yeah, we'll catch you all Wednesday. Thank you all for tuning in.